Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Spectator for part 2 of our interview series at the Young America's Foundation 2023 Student Conference in Washington, D.C. Here, we talk with historian Burt Folsom. We discuss the modern criticism of historical figures, in particular W&L's namesakes, and we explore the value of viewing American history through a more positive lens. Folsom has penned 10 books, including The Myth of the Robber Barons, which will soon be entering its 9th edition. His interests include free market economics, limited government, and education. Folsom has taught at multiple colleges and universities and currently serves as a distinguished fellow at Hillsdale College. Please enjoy what he has to say. All right, so my first question: how should we respond to modern criticism of historical figures, especially when their contributions to the American story have been so impactful? Yeah, good and bad.
This is I realize this is a major issue right now. The problem here is this. If we look at history, in the French Revolution, for example, they said, we can't have kings and they're anti-monarchy. So we take kings and queens off of decks of cards. They're anti-Christian, so the 7-day week has changed to a 10-day.
That's right.
So you have all of these changes. Once you get started down this, the danger is that there's no stopping place. So my general position is that only in extreme situations should there be changes of names in buildings or in the name of the college. And also the people, and we should respect the history that goes with it. If you don't like Washington and Lee, then go somewhere else. That would be my attitude. I think Washington and Lee are the two people of enormous integrity. Yes, they were both slave owners. You heard me on Washington. Talked about Lee never owned slaves, though. Do I remember that right? Did Lee ever own slaves?
I should actually be better informed on this, maybe myself, but I think his wife did, and there's some controversy about that.
He did everything he could in the last 5 years of his life after He set a peace that did not perpetuate tensions, as best that he could have an influence on that. He told his soldiers to go back to work. Grant, in return, let them keep some of their firearms and everything. And what you see is a very rare instance of a civil war that ended up working well. How about the Civil War in Haiti, when Haiti got rid of slavery in 1804? Dessalines, the president, a black, said, "Okay, whites, let's get together again." The whites came out and were massacred.
Mm-hmm.
And Haiti is our example that we're going to follow. We got rid of slavery, and we cleansed everything. I think that there's incredible things to admire with Washington and Lee. I happened to go to Center College, which played Washington and Lee in football.
Oh, wow, that's great.
When I was there. And I thought often, if I weren't going to Center, I would be honored to go to Washington and Lee. I said that then, and I believe it's what I believe now. I think I have relatives who went to Washington and Lee, and I find Washington and Lee men of integrity. You can model a lot of your life. You don't have to agree with everything, but you can model your life a lot with the character of those two men.
Yeah, that's a great point. So for people that want to just, focus on, the bad stuff, the bad side of their characters and actions, what advice do you give for kind of being able to both admire them and also, see their faults, kind of hit both?
Yeah. See, remember, we start back with where before the United States, slavery was universal. So, everybody, Plato, Aristotle defended slavery by saying some people are born to be slaves and some are free. Everybody who lived before 1776 cannot have any building or anything named because they were part of that regime.
Mm-hmm.
So you just eliminated all
the rest of history.
Interestingly, history begins with the United States, the very group that's getting attacked here, the one that started to end all this. And a lot of the people who are doing a lot to try to make things better were Washington and Lee, and I disagree with Lee and his decision on where to serve, but with the Confederacy, but he was a man of honor, and he was a big part of the American Civil War not becoming
guerrilla,
like a genocide between North and South. What you have to do is you have to go back to history. Show me all the civil wars in countries that didn't result in people being killed. Look at the English, who are a very civilized group. King Charles I gets beheaded, right?
I'm very familiar with the English Civil War.
Well, Grant was not trying to behead Lee, and Lee was not trying. Look at all the civil wars. This is where study comes. If you're going to be a scholar at Washington Lee, you need to answer and show which groups did better with getting over civil wars, Washington than Lee. Lee came in there and was just trying to help young men get an education and honor the Lord. That's what he was trying this last 5 years. Not to be conspicuous. He wasn't going to write a book and get big book royalties and do this. He wasn't trying to keep hostility alive. What an honorable 5 years that man spent with that college.
That's really good. Thank you. And then so my next big question. Many conservatives have accused liberal thinkers of being too critical of historic American race relations. Even abolitionist movements are often condemned for being paternal and having malicious intentions. How can somebody reasonably address these topics through a more optimistic view of the past?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, that was a big one.
No, it's but it's an input.
So just that many conservatives have accused liberal thinkers of being too critical of the history of American race. Even abolitionist movements are called out by liberals for being, having some racist motivations, being paternal, malicious. There's kind of this school of thought that, all right, even though we want slavery to end, we still want to have a racialized society where black people fill one niche and white people fill the other one. And so how can we reasonably address these topics with a more optimistic view?
Liberals want conservatives to apologize for slavery but liberals never want to apologize for the communist movements that have killed millions of people. See, we're talking about movements like in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, the North Vietnamese. How about Stalin, who killed almost as many of his own people as the Germans did, or at least a goodly portion. You're talking about people who had nothing as a legacy, really, except bloodshed, killing people, denying their rights, and imposing tyranny. And you want conservatives to apologize for having supported slavery. First of all, they didn't support slavery because people, as I said, freedom is in our DNA, and that's when the institution of slavery for the first time was undone in the United States. So rather than apologizing, I'm a conservative who is proud that my country was the first one to step in and stop this thing. And I think they ought to be praised for doing it, and the left ought to have to explain Stalin and other communist movements that have been so destructive of human life.
I see. And I mean, you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but what do you think is the value in viewing American history through a more optimistic lens, where we're not just so dragged out by these controversies?
The one thing, you heard me talking about Edison and Ford and all that. The one thing that is common, they're optimists. American success is born off the springboard of optimism. It has to be, because you have to believe I can spend. Steve Jobs, we're sitting here with these things that were non-existent 15 years ago. Steve Jobs spent millions of dollars before he ever received a penny from this. That is optimism. Henry Ford putting a car in every garage when he all had his little quadricycle with bicycle tires. And I mean, he was thinking ahead, and it was, I believe. Christians believe, because we believe that God loves us and that he's guiding our path. I have such tremendous optimism. There are scriptures that I quote. I'll be sometimes asleep, and I'll be sitting there going through the scriptures at the end of Ephesians 3, when according to his glorious riches, we are endowed with his love. And I'll just be reading along that, and I pray that I may know the breadth, length, depth, and height of the love of God. And I just feel that, and I'm an optimist. I want to get out there and talk with people about life can be good. Yeah, it can be bad. We know that. But the optimists have been the ones who have given us things like this. Yeah, they're sitting there using in our communication. So the optimists gave them to us.
Yeah, well, they've unleashed human possibility, and yes, it's beautiful to see that. And so my last question kind of ties more into scholarship, scholarly debate. So, I mean, you've mentioned some facts when you were up on stage about Black people owning slaves, participating, as perpetuating a slave society, essentially. I mean, those facts are very inconvenient for the current narrative. And, I mean, kind of having done some racial scholarship myself, my understanding is that those facts are just completely ignored and derided by, the current literature. So how do you overcome that derision and just refusal to engage with those types of facts?
You asked such a good question. I think of Henry Ford in 1904 on a street corner in Detroit, Michigan, crying because he couldn't find a banker that would back his automobile. Because they were all sold on the existing narrative of faster horses and carriages with better shock absorbers is the way, and they didn't want to take a chance on putting a car in every garage. And he just was persistent. That's what gets me and encourages me. Persistent people. It took me 10 years to write my New Deal book. I just about gave it up many times, but I thought, I've got to get this down. And I even got to thinking, this will be my worst, this is going to be bad. But then I'd get, no, it doesn't have to be, and the Lord can bless it. But then I would say, I'm getting stuff here that isn't said anywhere else. Even if I have to self-publish it and just reaches a few people, I owe it to
human knowledge, I guess.
Human knowledge, and I have a country that has given me so much to try to do this. By the time it was over, I mentioned it. I can remember looking at that. It was the #1 selling history book in the world on Amazon.com. Now, it wasn't there for a long time, but I thought this shows a persistent optimist, but I wouldn't have been a persistent optimist if I hadn't seen it so successfully demonstrated by so many other people. That history taught me, do it. It hurts. Do it. That was the answer I wanted to give some of the people who were asking me, well, but I have these people ask, they're on campus and they're doing this and that. The victory goes to the persistent optimist. You just have to keep it up. You just have to keep going.